Hi everyone, thank you for listening to our live Q&A with 3 local councillors from up and down the country and across the political spectrum, and 3 young councillors nonetheless, which is a rarity in politics. So we have Giles with us from Broxton. He is an associate solicitor at Pennington's Manches Cooper LLP and previously worked for the NSPCC. He studied his undergraduate at the University of Southampton. We have Lorianne from Stockton-on-Tees, a place where I've lived for a little bit myself. She was elected back in 2015 at age 19, and in addition to being a councillor and working in international development, she also writes novels and has written one about online bullying, which is obviously very important today. And then we have Jack. Jack studied politics at the University of Hull and he's still in Hull. He worked as Layla Moran's parliamentary assistant and now works in media and communications, and he is a massive advocate for the universal basic income. So thank you so much for joining us. So if I could ask you all the same question to start with, because I think this is the most interesting question. What inspired you to get in politics and stand for election as a local councillor? Giles, can I come to you first?
You certainly can. You certainly can. What inspired me? Well, I'd say probably what didn't inspire me. It's more local politics. It's all around you, and I very much the ward I stood within to become a councillor is one that I've lived in pretty much my since probably the age of 9-10, and there are lots of conversations you have with your neighbours about things going on, things to do with services for young people especially. I remember all kinds of things coming up, particularly in school. And the long and short of it was one day suddenly I think it just dropped in my mind somewhere. Something clicked within my mind that why not actually give it a go? Why always be at the periphery, sort of looking in, trying to discuss these issues or deal with these issues as they crop up from the outside. There's nothing stopping me from actually giving it a go. Really intimidating to begin with. But I think once you step out, it's actually pleasantly, surprisingly straightforward in terms of actually putting yourself up for it. So not one thing in particular I would say inspired me. It was more a willingness to get involved really with my local area. And yeah, so it's a myriad of issues, I would say.
Wow, no, that's really helpful, because I think a lot of people when they're thinking about getting involved in local politics feel quite intimidated. So to hear that that's perfectly normal, but actually you overcome it is really great. Thank you. Lorianne, may I come to you next?
Yeah, so similar to Giles, I didn't really have one main reason that inspired me, but I studied politics at sixth form. And I then asked my local MP if I could do some work experience in his office, and he said yes. So I was working there for quite a while during sixth form, and then he suggested that I stand as a councillor in where I lived. There was the local elections coming up, and there was a seat up in my local town, and I never thought of it before, but he was really supportive of me and supportive of young people getting into politics. So I wasn't sure, but then I think at the time, well, it still is in a way, but youth employment and austerity was really bad. It was really hitting young people quite hard in Teesside and the North East. And instead of just complaining about it and complaining what a hard time it was for young people, I wanted to just do something about it and to get involved.
Brilliant. I really like that you have kind of taken action into your own hands in the things that you're seeing as well. I think that's what gets most people, isn't it? Eventually something they see that they're like, I need to do something. Thank you. Jack, over to you.
Thanks. So it was 2 separate things for me. 1, getting involved in politics, and then 2, actually standing to be a councillor, because there's a bit of a gap in between. For me, I did a politics course at my sixth form at my college, which I wasn't meant to be on in the first place, but I just, results day came around and I was like, politics, yeah, I'll do that fine. My teacher at the time said, if you can name the 3 main political parties, we'll let you in. I managed to name the Lib Dems and the Conservatives. I tripped up with Ed Miliband and said, the red one, that's his party. And then didn't look back since, because I had a really great teacher and I learned loads on that course and I got really stuck in. And then after the 2015 general election, I chose to join a party. So I joined the Lib Dems and spent like 3 or 4 years just campaigning with like people I call now friends and colleagues, helping them get elected. And it was helping them getting elected and seeing the inspiring things that they did that actually, you know, I wanted to do that too, and I wanted to make a difference to my local community. So I decided to stand myself in 2019 and get elected for an area which I living in my community.
Amazing. That came across in what you all said as well, that passion for your community, and I think that's what local politics is all about. It can be really difficult for people to grasp what you do as local councillors. I wondered if you had kind of a case study or an example, or it could be more than one, that just really helps us to kind of visualise what you do on a daily basis. And maybe I'll go in reverse order this time. So Jack, can I come to you first?
Yeah, so again, 2 examples. There's the nitty-gritty pavement politics, which every councillor will always cite. The other day I was leafleting down a street and there was 3 really huge potholes down this street, and one of the residents said, have you seen these potholes? I was like, yes, you can't miss them. And he was like, are you our local councillor? Like, yep. Can you get these fixed for us? So I obviously took a photo of the potholes and sent it to the council and just said, we've got these down X street and X residents raised it. And week and a half later, they were all filled in and fixed. So it's that nitty gritty, like sort of pavement politics, doing things for residents that they see every day. And then the other flip side of it is that you get to do real change and make real change. And I'm sure I'll talk about this a lot, but one example of it was putting down a motion to trial universal basic income. And we basically wrote a motion and put this down to our council, which was accepted, and that meant that our council as an authority would write to government and pressure them and, you know, kind of ask them to take that on. And it's the 2 kind of factors where you have one where it's just the really simple basic things, and the other side of it where it's huge differences that could change kind of society.
Amazing, thank you, Jack. Lorianne, may I come to you next?
Yeah, so I would split my role as a councillor into 3 different parts. So I'd say one element is the same as what Jack said. It's dealing with very local issues that people raise to you. So it can be quite serious, like antisocial behaviour and crime, or it could be what I call like first world problems, like potholes and trees. So yeah, one element of it is responding to emails, people that you meet on the street, and just through social media you get a lot of requests as well now for just very local issues. A second part of the role, I would say, is working in the local community. So do a lot of community work, such as we've set up food banks. We've done a lot of local history events, which have attracted thousands of people from across the region to come and to some of our history events that we've done. I've also do stuff like bulb planting and community gardening, so some more proactive work in the community. And the third element of a role as a councillor, I would say, is more representation at the borough level. So each council works slightly differently, but so I would and have different responsibilities. But for my council, I have worked in the Adult Social Care Committee, and I'm currently a member of the Children and Young People Committee. So they work on wide issues, so the adult social care strategy for the whole area, or currently looking at looked after children policies and trying to improve our services for looked after children, and like education to work type policies, and representing our community, and not just representing the direct residents we serve, but the whole borough, and working on policies for them.
Yeah, that's really helpful to understand. I know that the structure is slightly different in each council, but the structure in that there are committees as well that look at specific issues as well as looking after your area. And the same as Jack kind of talking about local, but also national politics and how those interplay with each other with the different issues as well, and having to take a local perspective. Thank you. Giles, may I come to you?
Yeah, no, definitely. I definitely echo everything that's been said by both Jack and Lorianne. You do have, yeah, the nitty-gritty local side of things. One example I would say from my area recently was we had plans were put forward essentially to approve quite a big incinerator, essentially. So as you can imagine, the local community wasn't that best pleased with it, and we, quite exciting stuff, we essentially had to organize a whole bunch of marches, protests, that type of thing. Really had to maximize sort of the voice and the degree of sort of resentment towards this entity just being plumped right in the middle of a community that wasn't really looking for anything like that. It sort of, you know, came out of nowhere, so to speak. And so long story short, I mean, that was successfully, that campaign was successful, and the application was refused. And that's the interesting thing, I think, with the local politics and how it sort of interplays the various like tiers, because I'm a borough councillor, but then within my county, you know, there is the county council as well. And it's one of those things where, for instance, the county had approved that application, but the borough was against the application. And you have to balance all of that with, you know, the party interest as well, actually, because it just so happens that you had a borough essentially being of one particular party, the county being the same party, but yet disagreeing on this issue, and it having a national impact, because you've got the Secretary of State had to get involved in the end to, you know, to deal with that particular application. So I like that interplay. It starts off, and the funny thing with local, it starts off so small. It can seem like, you know, a fairly pedantic thing that's going through or whatever it is, and before you know it, a few months down the line, how did this get so big? Like, how is so many? What, we've got flags now? What's happening? There's like a march, right? You know. But that's the thing, because I think communities change in that incremental way. You know, slowly, before you know it, like a community can change and look very different, you know, in 10 years time, 20 years time. So unless you're on the ball and you have a clear idea or vision of what you want your community to be like, you will just be swept away by all kinds of interest, whether that's private interest from companies, you know, at higher level interest, whatever it is. Unless you have quite a strong sort of plan for your area, someone else will, and you will simply be swept along with that. So yeah, I suppose that's one practical thing I could probably say. That's more exciting end. But yeah, dealing with emails, the potholes, Jack's got it spot on. You know, you are going to deal with a pothole at some point, so just be ready for that. So
that's brilliant, and really helps to kind of understand how party politics plays out as well. Because I think often certainly I can be guilty of like forgetting that will determine kind of what policies go through and what don't, regardless of who the party that your local representative is. It matters what the representation is at the entire council level, whether that's borough or county. So really helpful to think about that, and a really tangible example as well. I love that the Secretary of State got involved in the end as well. Fantastic. Jack, I have a quick question for you, if I may. It's quite a practical question, but what's the best way for people to get in touch with their local councillor, not just about issues, but if they have brilliant ideas as well about their local community that they think local councillors can help them with?
I'll start off by saying it's not as easy as it should be to get in touch with your local councillor. I think we can all agree that it could be easier. I think the easiest way to get in touch direct is every council will have a website where they list all of their councillors, and you can literally just, say, for example, Hull City Council, your councillors, Boothry Ward, and my name will come up along with my ward colleagues, and you can just, my phone number's on there, my email address on there as well, and so you can get in touch, and that's the same case for most councillors. But I think there's a lot more that we could do to engage particularly young people in local politics when it comes to this. So we could do things like citizens assemblies, where you get like a sample of different age groups and people, and you essentially bring them into the council chamber so they can have their views heard about what matters to them. You could also like consult and listen to various different groups of residents. So for example, if a council wanted to introduce a youth activities fund, I'd say like spend some time actually talking, consulting with young people and asking what they want. And you've got to be really proactive, like as a council and as a councillor. I think there's definitely a 50-50 split. Like we have our details readily available in public, but as elected representatives, we should be doing a lot of that outreach as well.
Yeah, I don't think, as obvious as it sounds, I don't think many people would think to go straight to the council website. And each council website is slightly different to find. I guess you only need to know your own, but to find out who your councillors are. So that's, yeah, really helpful, and really innovative ideas around citizens' assemblies and things like that. Thank you. Lorianne, there is an election coming up on the 6th of May. That's why we're meeting to talk today. There are elections taking place up and down the country, and people will want to know how they can find out about different local councillors and the different candidates who are standing in their area. What's the best way for people to find out about you?
I would say it's actually really the job of the candidates to make sure that people know about them, rather than the people having somewhere, like, and voters having somewhere to go and look. I mean, there will probably be a lot of candidates have social media, so you probably find candidates information about candidates on social media, or very, very basic information about who's standing on the council website. But I'd say it's mainly up to the candidates to let the voters know what they believe in, what they care about, and why they're standing. And I think personally, we do quarterly newsletters, and we've done a lot of door knocking. It's been very difficult over the past year with COVID, but then also on local issues, we'd send out letters to individual streets, individual people, just to let them know about issues that may affect them individually. So I would hope that everyone in my ward would definitely know who I was, and that when it comes to election time, people definitely know who I am from the last election. But if you haven't heard from your councillor for 4 years, and then they're asking them to vote for you, asking you to vote for them, then that would raise some alarm bells for me, and you should really know who's standing. It's up to the candidate.
Such a good point. Yeah, if you don't hear from them any other time, you want to question that. I really like that both you and Jack have picked up on kind of the onus. Not all of the onus is on like the individual. There's an onus on you as well, which is really great to hear. Thank you. Giles, you touched on this in your opening question about kind of the process of getting involved in politics and not being as scary as it might seem. But what advice do you have for anyone who does want to get involved in local politics, but they don't know where to start?
I think I think a lot of people out there would be surprised at how valuable their time would actually be, to any local authority, essentially in any sort of sphere, put it that way. It doesn't necessarily, getting involved in local politics, I would say, first of all, doesn't necessarily mean becoming a councillor. That's something I think it'd be great, and I think there are lots of authorities up and down the country whereby there is a need really for more candidates to put themselves forward, for there to be a little bit more choice, that type of thing. And quite often you will find councillors in particular areas having to really stand more so out of the fact that there isn't an alternative. So I think sometimes, before I got involved in politics, I had an idea in my mind that it's really impossible to get into it. There's this massive, great big line of people sort of lining up to become local councillors, and actually there isn't. There really isn't. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is just ask questions. So if, let's say, your thing is sport, for instance, and you aren't, let's say, happy with how sport is being organised in your area, or you aren't happy with rubbish collection, whatever it is, don't be afraid to pick up the phone to someone at the your local authority, or even try and get hold of, as Jack has helpfully pointed out, the various ways you can do that. Try and get hold of the councillor, the relevant councillor, your ward councillor, the cabinet member, whoever it is. They are probably more than willing to have a conversation with you about, various ideas about how to make things better. Because one thing that I found is that it's not so much one of the big issues that we local politics in particular, national politics side of things. And can you still hear me?
You cut out for a little bit, but you're back now. You cut out, as you said, one of the things about local politics.
Oh, right. I'll say one of the things about local politics as compared to nationals, we don't really have as much exposure as national. So what that means is that I think sometimes people think politics is literally what they see on TV. So, lots of shouting, in this huge arena and all of it. And actually, local politics, you do have the chance actually to work quite constructively and in a less adversarial way with your local colleagues, regardless of which party they're in. Because when it comes down to it, fixing a pothole, there's only so many ways you can get a pothole fixed. So it really simplifies working and cross-party working and that type of thing. So don't be afraid just to pick up the phone to someone, and don't be afraid to ask the questions, because it's one thing reading a website article about how you get involved. It's another thing just picking the phone to someone, having them give you helpful tips, having them say, that's the form you fill in, that's what you do, bish bash bosh, before you know it, you're sat in a chamber somewhere voting on things. That's literally all it is. It's not that big a deal. You could be a local councillor next year if you wanted to. It really is that easy. So that's my 2 pence anyway.
Amazing, thank you. Something that's sprung to mind as you've all been speaking about the different things that you've done in your areas and your journeys into politics is how have you found being a young councillor? Have you found that you've thought of things perhaps differently to other people and being able to push innovation, or have you found that people have been really welcoming and really wanted kind of a young perspective, or the opposite? What have your experiences been of being a young councillor? Lorianne, maybe I'll come to you first.
I'd say mostly really positive. I'm the youngest on the council by quite a lot of years, and everyone actually seemed from all parties were actually being quite supportive of having a young councillor in the council. I mean, a few residents have said, oh, you're too young to be a councillor, and there's been a few sort of comments, but nothing. It's been mainly positive, and I think don't be worried to get involved as a young person, because whether you're a new councillor at 19 or a new councillor at 70, I've found out that actually everyone was nervous and everyone didn't really know what they were doing, even if they're a couple of generations older than me. So I wouldn't put, just because you're not entirely sure what a local councillor does or what an MP does, don't stop that from you getting involved in politics.
Brilliant, thank you. Giles or Jack, would you like to add to that?
Would you like to go, Jack?
Yeah, go on. I'll add my view. I think it depends on what type of council you like. If you were to be a councillor in, so we're quite a a tightly contested council in Hull, I think that definitely reflects on how supportive an opposition can be. So I think like I have unbelievable support from my group. I'm the youngest councillor on the council, and they've been nothing but supportive. But I think you can go to an opposition and ask for acceptance. You might not always get it, especially if you're coming into a council with a lot of different ideas. So I think it's that trade-off. Like politics is not always nice, sadly, but I think as long as you've got people around you who will support you, then by all means go for it, and don't always expect the people opposite to be nice to you just because you're a younger age and you think or look a bit differently. So I think it's that trade-off that you hope everyone will be nice, but sometimes they might not be.
Yeah, I mean that's life, isn't it?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
But yeah, I get what you're saying about it's interesting about how hotly contested the council is. Thank you, Giles.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I definitely echo that, and I'd say the great thing with the way our system works in this country is a vote doesn't really know age, so that kind of neutralizes that whole element of it. The vote's a vote. If my vote's needed for something, or Jack's vote's needed, Lorianne's vote's needed, there has to be some level of getting the young councillors on board with that, and inevitably it has an impact at any council. Even having one young councillor there will have an impact, because I think there is actually an appetite, particularly if there is if there's an absence, or there has been historically an absence of a young voice. There is, I think, for most councils that have had that historic lack of youth, do have a curiosity. So the moment you turn up, they genuinely want to know what you think of like everything, basically. And they genuinely want help in how to reach the next. I think I can probably will have a we can all probably agree that up and down the country, one of the things which local councils do fear is lack of engagement with young people. That's just, I think, a reality that young people don't particularly engage when it comes to local elections and that type of thing. Hopefully this is going some way to changing all of that, and we're going to see a difference there. But it's a bit of a vicious circle, because I think what's probably happened is that young people are looking at things such as councils and thinking, oh, that's for my parents, and that's for my grandparents. Even they don't see the link. And I think perhaps any young person listening to this should know that actually your face could be the difference to actually get other people just like you on there, so you see more people that look like you, essentially. But I found it okay. The council I'm on, we actually don't do too badly in terms of young people, but the leader of the council is actually younger than me, so that's a difference. I think that he's the youngest leader ever had, basically.
Yes.
So that just goes to show actually there isn't a ceiling on it. There isn't a ceiling in terms of what you can go and do at the council. It's not a case of, if I'm a young person, I will never be trusted with anything ever. It's a simple case of, if you are good and if you can work with your colleagues, of course there's more than enough opportunity for you to achieve anything. I would say that you're able to. So I've enjoyed the experience, definitely. I've enjoyed it.
Just wait, see chat. Brilliant, thank you. We're moving to the quickfire round. So the first quickfire question is, if you could change, bring in or abolish one council policy, what would it be? And Giles, I'll come to you first this time.
Okay, so I'm chairman of scrutiny, and I think the scrutiny of any council can only be strengthened by cross-party working, for instance. So I would have some kind of change whereby that's instilled into the scrutiny system. I think it can only improve and strengthen democracy if you have some genuine channel or avenue whereby a counter voice can be brought to the table. So I'm not exactly sure. I'll put my hands up and say I'm not exactly sure practically how the change would be done. If it's a case of up and down the country, you have maybe a member of the opposition chairing scrutiny, for instance, or if you have a system whereby maybe they're vice chair, or you basically have the rules supporting and entrenching the idea of you must work cross-party. I think that to be encouraged, essentially.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm sure that there's probably some structures in national, like in Parliament, that could be brought in for those kinds of things, because I guess that's the point of select committees to an extent, which would be quite good if there's precedent. Laurianne.
So I would want to bring in a proper education to work policy in our council, improve work experience and people's access to really good quality work experience. And it's something I do in my day job in Eastern Europe. We've got a project in Eastern Europe, and I just think that we don't actually have that properly in the UK, and I think we could. UK development money is paying for some really great projects in Eastern Europe, but we lack in certain areas in the UK. I think in the Teesside and the North East, there's actually a lot of really great jobs, well-paying jobs, but people don't know they exist, and teachers and parents are all very pessimistic about the economy in the North East and Teesside, and I actually think that's not the case. And I think good education to work policy and good work experience can prove that actually there's some really great careers for young people in the North East.
Yeah, when I can echo when I lived there, like the amount of investment in particularly around like the Tees barrage and that area was, you could, in the 3 years I was there, you could see a really significant transition through investment in the area. Absolutely. Jack.
Yeah, so I alluded to it earlier, but one thing I'd love to bring in would be a citizens' assembly. And basically that is a group of people who are representative of like your council area, and you regularly consult with either them or a different group of people depending on the issue about what's important to the city. So to give a really local example, there is uproar at the moment at some new cycle lanes that have been introduced, and it's basically got a load of cyclists on one side who are really angry at the road users and a load of road users on the other side who are really angry at the cyclists. And I think like the best way to sort something like that out is to bring residents with the authority, whether that be national or local. And so it's about like kind of bringing people into the democratic process, letting them have their view, and just that wider point of having a council that listens and gets their residents to engage more. I think that's a really important part of local democracy.
Yeah, that's such a brilliant example. It's interesting that both you and Giles have picked upon quite structural changes and about like decision making and scrutiny. But yeah, before I ask you the last two quickfire questions, I've realised as we've been talking that you all kind of also work in relevant fields as well as being local councillors. So Jack, you're media and comms, Laurianne, you're international development, Giles, you work in the legal profession. How do you find having a job that's kind of at least gives you some skills or some knowledge of what you might experience as a local councillor? Because I guess a lot of young people who might be thinking about getting involved in anything like this would also have to balance either studying or working or something like that. So it'd be really interesting to hear how you do that. Laurianne, I'll maybe come to you first this time.
Yeah, it's actually been really useful recently. So I'm working on some great economic growth projects in Eastern Europe, and actually some of those ideas I'm like, we could really do with that in Teesside. So I'm currently lobbying's got a bad word at the moment, but lobbying our colleagues and some of the senior officers to get investment in some sort of creative hubs in Teesside and in my town, Billingham, to make sure that we get some capital investment in the town centre, to make sure that there's good high paid jobs in the town centre, in the town I live in.
Yeah, amazing. And I think, I agree with lobbying at the moment, but I think most people get into politics because they want to make a change and they want to influence and they want to inform, and it's just, how do we define lobbying? It sounds like, if that's what you want to do, then we shouldn't be shy about the fact that we lobby for these things that we think are going to be really great for our areas if we do it in the right way. Jack.
So I spent some time working for an MP while I was at university, and then I spent some time working at the Lib Dems HQ, and while being elected as a councillor. Then I spent a brief stint in the charity sector working in education and particularly tutoring, and currently I'm a communications manager for the Liberal Democrats nationally, and that ties in really good with what I do as a local councillor, because I kind of am on the ground quite often and get to talk to real people and voters. So I think it's really helpful, like if you ever want to work for a political party, like kind of muck in and do a bit yourself and speak to voters and residents regularly. You don't have to be a councillor, but speaking to voters in your area and understanding what they care about is ultimately really helpful if you want a job in politics, and it just gives you that edge on people who might not necessarily speak to voters and engage in their community regularly.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And Giles?
Well, my role, certainly, I think it does help. I think it helps quite a lot more from the I would say the confidence and maturity side of things, because my role is public facing. So you have people walking in who then become clients, and it's actually not too dissimilar to being a councillor, because you are represented. I have to represent individuals in the context of litigation, so they have an aim, and quite often I am the difference between them and their problem being solved, essentially. So a lot of those skills, communication skills, that type of thing, prioritizing, strategizing, all of that is part and parcel of the skills, which can be quite handy. But more so than anything, I think the biggest thing that I've picked up from work is that people are real people, like with actual, like they aren't robots necessarily. So you have to understand what their aim is, what that thing is that's bugging them, and it's easier said than done. I think professionally, when someone walks in, you come out of uni sometimes and you learn how to be very polished, and then real life just slaps you in the face and you think, oh right, so in real life not everything is neatly packaged, not everything is academic, so sometimes you have to roll up your sleeves and be a little bit unconventional, should we say. But so I think it's valuable. It can be quite tricky trying to balance everything sometimes, but like they say, if you want something done, ask a busy man, because you are put into practice your time management, that type of thing, and I think it's a really useful, being a councillor is a really useful thing to be involved in. Even if you have a full-time job, don't feel as if it's out of reach. Don't you can. It is very, very doable, because quite frankly, almost the majority of those who act as councillors do so part-time. So it's something that is designed to be achievable.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really helpful, because I think that might have been something that would have been at the back of people's minds who are interested in doing that. So these two are very quick final questions. In one sentence, why is it important that people vote in the upcoming local elections, Jack?
Because you have a chance to change your area for the better.
Giles?
Sounds really cliche, but it does matter. It does matter. Turn up and do something. Like, even if you want to spoil your ballot, I'll be controversial. Even if you want to spoil your ballot, make your voice heard so people know you're not happy, or people, do something. Just do it. essentially. It's there to do, so you use it. More than one sentence, but there you go.
It was 1 point, so we'll accept. Lorianne.
So I would say that local councils do a lot more than just empty bins and cut the grass. They're responsible for, my small council alone is responsible for hundreds of millions of taxpayers' money, hundreds of millions of pounds, and delivers hundreds of services. And the only people who can hold politicians to account for how they spend their money are voters.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. It's become so apparent, certainly to me, and from speaking to young people, to them as well, just how much what happens in your local area impacts your everyday life, because we've had to stay hyper-local over the last year, and therefore the amenities that you may have thought, oh well, it doesn't matter if I have to travel a bit to get like better amenities, like now you're like, actually these should be local. So thinking about like parks, high streets and care, etc. So yeah, absolutely. Last but not least, finish this sentence. I have a voice. Lorianne.
It's going to be really cheesy. So I have a voice and opinions, just like most young people, every disabled person and every woman, and I deserve to be listened to just as much as anyone else.
Brilliant. Not cheesy at all. And if there's any question where it's fine to be cheesy, it is this one. Jack.
I have a voice that says, even if you don't know who the party leaders are right now, you could end up being a politician.
Thank you. And Giles.
I have a voice that says you don't have to be a particular age to have a voice. You don't have to be of a particular you don't have to be of a particular makeup as a person to have a voice. Everyone has a voice, so just make it count.
Thank you so much. I have really enjoyed speaking to you this evening and really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thank you.